Hello, hello. I am back with round 6 from the 2025 Grenke Open. Going into this game, I had 3.5 out of 5 points, and I was paired with an international master, Mihail Nekrasov, who is from Ukraine. So my opponent is actually 80 years old for this game, maybe turning 80 this year. And so I realized he had definitely dropped a lot in rating over the last couple of years, but you always have to be very careful when playing senior players because they have a ton of experience, and if they get into a position that they're well familiar in, of course, they can give you a lot of trouble. And they've also been around a long time. They're not really afraid of anything anymore. So, you can't just kind of like bluff and intimidate them. They're not gonna go for it. So I feel like this would be a tough game, but I definitely had my hopes up to try and get a win. And I decided to start with one knight f3, basically to try and actually leave theory as quickly as possible, as I felt like my opponent, just based off his games, was pretty familiar with his opening systems that he plays, like against e4 and d4. But against knight f3, I thought maybe we could get more of a battle out of the opening. So here comes d5, and I played g3. And this is kind of like a Catalan King's Indian attack hybrid move order, really based on just seeing what black does and then deciding if white wants to play like with c4 or with d4 or with b3 in some cases, and so on. So c6, playing for like a Slav kind of setup. Here I went c4, knight f6, bishop g2. And now black has like a lot of options here. I think like most common is to develop the bishop, like bishop f5, bishop g4. I didn't have anything super special in mind here, but normally on bishop g4 or bishop f5, white is going queen b3 at some point. On bishop g4, maybe knight e5 first, and then queen b3. And this is kind of like some theory here. But in the game, black played g6. Which now takes the game into a kind of fianchetto Grunfeld. In fact, we'd get an immediate transposition if I played d4. I didn't really want to do this. I decided to play b3 instead, which I had in mind as being a somewhat flexible setup here. Bishop g7, bishop b2, castles, castles. And my idea here is not to play d4, but rather to put the pawn on d3, then go knight bd2. And I thought it's like a pretty flexible, ready kind of approach, like d3, knight d2, maybe rook c1, rook c2, queen over to a1, this kind of thing, eventually trying to trade off the dark-squared bishops and leave black with some weaknesses around their king, utilize the strong Catalan bishop as long as I can. Okay, so here comes a5. And, okay, reasonable move. Black is trying to play a4 with some counterplay. I went d3. I checked the theory here, and apparently knight c3 is the main move, kind of stopping a4. And on knight e4, white's idea would be to play knight a4. Offering a trade of bishops takes, knight takes b2, and it seems like maybe white can fight for a small advantage here. Well, okay, I played d3, a4. This came as a bit of a surprise because I thought I could just play b4, which I ended up doing, because to me this looked like a nice structure for white. Black cannot really play a3 yet because I'm going to take, and otherwise I want to play a3 myself, or in some cases knight a3 and just kind of blockade the pawn. So black played dc, dc, and queen b6. And according to the theory here, there have been some games with queen takes d1, black just going for the endgame, playing bishop to e6, and after knight a3, I think white is a little bit better here, but okay, very playable endgame position. Black is not hugely worse here, but white's idea is to play like knight to d4 and then maybe b5 somewhere and just get some pressure on the queen side. During the game, this looked pleasant for me, but of course, very playable. Okay, instead we got queen b6, which allows white to kind of secure the queen side with a3. So here already I was starting to feel pretty comfortable with my position. Rook d8 getting a tempo, but queen c1. And I feel like black's activity here is not really that serious because the queen side is still largely undeveloped, and I'm ready to one day push c5, and my idea is also to bring the knight from d2 to c4, maybe even to b6. So yeah, I quite like my prospects here, but okay, here comes bishop f5. And at this point, I was trying to figure out what to do here. I was considering, I think, many different moves, but the main reason I didn't want to play a move like knight to c3, let's say, just like developing, was because I thought it would allow black to exchange a lot of pieces with like knight e4. Maybe this is okay for white, but for example, something like take, let's say bishop takes b2, queen b2, bishop takes e4, and yeah, I wasn't totally sure about a position like this, where now it's like hard to avoid more trades. If I play c5, the bishop gets the d5 square. So this didn't really seem like something I wanted to get. And I definitely considered knight d2 here as well. But I think I was a little bit unsure about maybe a move like bishop h6 here, which feels a bit unpleasant, like pinning the knight. I don't really want to go e3 because that gives up the d3 square. Maybe this is not so bad, I don't know. If I play queen c3, black just drops back, bishop g7, and then I'm going to have to deal with like knight e8 stuff here. So this one didn't seem super comfortable for me either. So I decided to start with c5. And I realized like I just need to start with this move, kick black's queen, and now I have kind of more freedom to develop. So queen a6, hitting the e-pawn. And here I decided to go knight d2. So I'm kind of offering the pawn because I had rook to e1 in mind, followed by maybe even rook takes e7. And I thought this was like a pretty interesting pawn sacrifice because I feel like I'm actually leading in development here. And if black takes time with his queen to take the pawn, then I'm going to get a lot of like attacking initiative. I also considered other moves as well, like knight c3. Again, I didn't like because of like knight e4. And rook e1 seemed possible, but also felt just a little bit slow because, yeah, I'm just like defending the pawn. I'm still not developing. Though I did believe that white should be better here. I thought I was kind of choosing between a couple of nice options, but I thought rook e1, maybe even bishop f1 is reasonable for white, or knight d2, and so on. But okay, eventually I decided on knight d2. I was like, let's just play more aggressively because I really believed in this. And black does take the pawn, which I wasn't sure if he would, because it looks very scary to take the pawn, but my opponent just shows no fear. He didn't see how he's losing or getting the queen trapped, so he just takes the pawn. And to be fair, if he doesn't take the pawn, then I'm going knight c4 next, and then the queen on a6 is going to feel really out of the game. So queen takes e2. I went rook e1 and queen d3, played by black. And yeah, at this point, okay, my first thought was to go rook takes e7, but when I reached this position, I also thought like maybe knight to c4 is interesting, with ideas of, just playing like rook e7 and then knight e5 with tempo and going after f7. I think what ended up changing my mind about this one was that black could play, let's say queen c2, or maybe even knight d7 first, followed by queen to c2. And this kind of bothered me that black could get the queens off here. I wasn't sure if this was something I wanted to allow. I still think white is actually doing quite well here, but I wasn't totally sure about this. So I decide to just take on e7 right away, which is my original instinct. And then, okay, I kind of circled back around to it. And now I'm threatening rook takes f7, followed by knight e5, winning the queen. So black played knight d7, which I think was the main move that I was considering here, just covering the e5 square. So otherwise, it's hard for black to find a decent move. Like maybe knight to d5 is kind of possible, but I didn't really believe in this at all. I can take on b7, and the idea here for black would be to try and trap the rook with like bishop c8. But I thought white should have more than enough in this case. Funny idea is if black takes here and then goes bishop c8, I have rook takes f7, and then king takes knight e5. And then if bishop c8 right away, I'm not sure exactly what white should do. I think I just take on g7. If king takes, I take here again and win the queen. And if black takes the rook, then I just feel like white has insane compensation with the darker bishop. I can just like pull back bishop to b2, and this looks incredibly dangerous for black. Knight e5 is coming, followed by knight g4, knight h6, knight c4 is coming, followed by queen h6. I think white's pieces here are actually just 1-2 moves away from coming into life. Knight c4, knight d6, and so on. I actually started considering a lot of these exchange sacrifices, especially after my opponent's actual move, knight bd7, because here I realized black has ideas of like knight to d5 or even bishop e6 first, and then knight d5, and my rook on e7 is in danger of getting trapped. So yeah, white has a number of reasonable options here, like knight c4 was the main move I was considering. And yeah, here this one looks really annoying because I'm threatening knight d6. I'm actually threatening rook takes f7 again, followed by knight e5 check, because I have two knights that can go to e5. So the main line I was looking at here is knight d5, where it would seem that I kind of have to sacrifice the exchange if I really want to make this line work. Well, it's not totally true. I could just play rook e1 back, bishop takes b2, knight takes b2. And I think this would be actually quite reasonable for white because I hit the queen, and then eventually my knight can just come back, knight c4, knight to d6. So during the game, I wasn't like totally sure what's going on here, but I thought white is better, but yeah, I didn't know by how much. So what I really wanted to make work was bishop takes g7, where if king takes g7, then I can take on f7 with check. And after king takes f7, we get our favorite knight e5. So after bishop g7, critical would be for black to go knight takes e7. And this is the position I wasn't totally sure about. Like I thought white had very decent compensation if I just pull back bishop b2. And indeed, I think this is correct. Although it's a little bit hard to go for this in the game without being 100% sure that you're going to break through. But much stronger actually was this move queen h6. So this, Compy pointed out to me after the game because I was considering this, but of course the move that would bother me was f6. And here white would have to find a really nice continuation, knight to g5. Threatening queen h7, so black kind of has to take. And now just pulling the bishop back, bishop b2. So white is a full rook down here, knight on c4 is hanging, but of course queen g7 is a huge threat, and black has no way of covering the diagonal. So had I considered this, I think, would have been able to calculate it till the end because there's actually not much to see here. Like the king has to move. That's the only kind of way to get out of mate. But then queen g7 check. If the king goes back, then knight d6 wins black's queen and the game. And if the king comes up, then I think many moves, but rook e1 seems to be the simplest, where white is just getting all of their material back with interest. And yeah, black is just completely lost. So I don't remember how deeply I was trying to figure this out, like on knight c4, knight d5, bishop g7, knight takes e7. I think I was mainly considering the move bishop to b2 here, just queen h6, f6. I kind of looked at it only briefly and yeah, didn't really see this knight g5, bishop b2 idea. So ultimately I thought I didn't know if this was worth risking. But okay, should be said that yeah, that line is actually very good for white. I would say knight c4 is the strongest move here. But what I ended up doing actually I think was not so bad. I go knight e1, hitting the queen and covering the c2 square, so forcing black's queen to go back to queen a6, and now knight c4. And so when I played this move here, I was basically anticipating to sacrifice the exchange, pretty much as we see in the game. Because now, okay, I'm threatening knight to d6, and then f5 and f7 is hit. Knight on d6 is super strong. If the bishop comes back to e6, I have like knight f3 and knight to g5 to follow up. So yeah, black goes bishop e6 first and looks to take the rook with knight d5 at some point or king f8. At this point, I think king f8 is kind of the main threat, or bishop f8, something like this. But I pretty quickly played bishop f1 here. So hitting the queen on a6, or looking for some discoveries, queen a7, and knight f3. And yeah, so at this point, I'm just kind of anticipating the exchange sack and getting my knight into position. And I felt fairly confident here that I should be getting more than enough for the rook. Because what we get is knight to d5, I take on e6, f takes e6, and bishop takes g7. Now king takes g7, and I go knight g5. It was also possible to start with queen to b2 check. I don't think this changes much, but the idea for white is essentially the same. I just want to get my knights in, one knight on g5, the other knight going to d6. I want my queen on this diagonal. I want my bishop to come in at some point, like bishop d3, and I want to get the rook and rook e1 as well. And if I can do all that, then it seems like white should just have an overwhelming attack. Because black is up the exchange, but queen is on a7, rook is on a8. Of course, these pieces are very, very far away from the action. And black's knights are well placed, but yeah, that's about it. And the king, of course, has a lot of weaknesses. So intuitively, I just evaluated this position as being very good for white, and also I just couldn't calculate any way for black to kind of easily untangle. So knight g5, knight f8, queen b2 check, king g8, and now knight e5. And this is kind of the idea I had in mind when I was like going for the sacrifice with some picture like this, where I have these knights hopping around, and black just has so many weaknesses to deal with here. Main threat is to play knight f7, and then knight h6 is mate. I also have knight f7 followed by queen h8, mating idea. So yeah, I just thought this is really, really, really very difficult for black to defend. So rook e8 was played, and here I come in with one knight. And yeah, now I'm threatening to go knight h6 check, followed by knight ef7, or knight takes c6. So if the king ever steps on this diagonal, I just have knight c6 check, and the queen on a7 is lost. So already, I think black is an only move here to play h5, which my opponent found, giving the king a square on h7. And yeah, now white has a lot of options. I mean, I think at any point white can just start developing bishop d3, rook e1, and it's just a matter of time before the pieces are able to break through. But of course, you don't want to give black too much time to try and get their heavy pieces out as well. So I was looking for something pretty forcing here. I go for knight h6 check, king h7, and now knight ef7. So this move I thought was very reasonable because I'm threatening mate on h8. I'm basically forcing black to go e5, which he plays. And now my idea was to take on e5, which I thought is kind of nice here because there's some tactics involved. If king takes h6, I have knight f7 check, followed by queen h8 mate. And if rook takes e5, looking to get two pieces for the rook, well then not queen takes e5, because here black could play king takes h6. I give this check. If the king walks out, the king gets mated, but black has knight h7. Key defensive move. White has no checks. The queen is hit by the rook, and here black is an extra piece for one pawn, and you know white's attacking with just the queen, so there's really not nearly enough here. White's pieces are too far away, so this would be good for black. However, after rook takes e5, white does not have to take. White has a very nice move, knight f7. We're now threatening to just win the whole rook for free, or I guess for one piece, so basically getting the exchange back, where white will then have the extra pawn, and black's king will be super weak. And of course the rook is pinned, so if the rook moves, then there's queen h8 mate all over again. So yeah, I thought this was kind of nice. Knight takes e5. Both knights are hanging in a way, but they both defend each other with this knight f7 resource. And otherwise, I want to bring my other knight back to f7 and give checkmate on h8 in some lines. So here black goes queen b8. And yeah, well now actually knight ef7, I thought black can move this knight on f8 somewhere, let's say knight d7 or knight e6. And yeah, covers the mate, and then my two knights are kind of awkward. So instead I decided to go knight hf7, keeping the knights centralized and stronger here. And yeah, now I'm actually threatening to play knight takes c6, discovered attack, followed by queen h8 mate. So this one is pretty tough for black. I was thinking the only move is king to g8 here, getting out of this threat. And then actually I wasn't totally sure how I was going to continue. I think I was thinking like knight to d6. I would start something like rook e7 or rook e6. I'm not sure, maybe rook e7, and like bishop c4 or bishop d3, followed by rook d1, rook e1, and just start building up here. Because I couldn't really find like an immediate knockout for white. But I did think the position still is really good, because now we have a pawn for the exchange. All of our pieces are strong. Black's king is still really weak. And yeah, black's pieces are still kind of dominated. In particular, if I can keep this knight on d6, Kasparov calls this the octopus knight, then it just feels like, yeah, black has a really hard time playing around it. So I don't think the game is going to be over very, very soon. But yeah, it does feel like white has a decisive advantage. Instead, in the game, we saw knight to e6, which kind of, I think, loses the game pretty much on the spot, because now I can play queen to d2. Previously, this move wasn't possible because of rook takes e5, but now it is, and the queen is turning queen h6, queen h8 mate. If black goes king g8, then queen h6 anyway, and queen h8 is a huge problem. So black tried g5, but yeah, now the queen gets in this way, queen d3 check, king moves, queen g6, king f8 is forced, and yeah, I looked for like a minute or two here if I had any kind of like nice ways to checkmate here, like knight h6, knight d6. I think all these moves are winning. Like I can take on g5 as well, and should be just, yeah, kind of winning for white. But okay, knight d7 check is the simplest, just immediately winning the queen. And here my opponent resigned. So yeah, actually overall I was pretty happy with this game. I felt like the opening was fine, and then I kind of developed pretty nicely here with knight d2, like sacrificing this pawn. And then with rook e7, I guess I was already like kind of anticipating that I was going to be sacrificing this rook at some point. I wasn't sure how yet, but yeah, I thought I found some nice sequence here, like knight e1, knight c4, bishop f1, bringing the knight back to f3. And yeah, after I took on e6, I thought like I kind of played a pretty like textbook exchange sacrifice from here, where I just slowly bring in all of my pieces. The knights have this like, yeah, nice dance with each other where they jump around. Knight comes back to e5, and I actually never got a chance to develop my other pieces, like my bishop and my rook. As it turned out, the knights and the queen, they were able to actually do the whole job themselves. So after this game, I was on 4.5 out of 6, and yeah, definitely looking to the last 3 rounds with confidence. So we'll soon see how that played out. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully I'll catch you in the next videos. Take care.